welcome to our community town hall on our YouTube channel at Democracy Forward. We are so grateful to have you all with us and really want to thank you for all that you've been doing in your communities and throughout the country as we are taking in and responding to this last month that the Trump administration, this first month the Trump administration has been in office. My name is Skye Perryman. I'm the president and CEO of Democracy Forward. At Democracy Forward, we are engaged in ensuring that people and communities throughout this country have the legal representation they need in the courts to protect their rights and to protect their chance of building a better future. What that means right now is that we are spending a lot of time in court having to bring challenges against the Trump-Vance administration, an administration that has accelerated the implementation of incredibly extreme policies from Project 2025, which we know Americans across the country reject, policies that raise costs on working families, that make it harder for Americans to make ends meet, and that really attack our fundamental freedoms. And so I am pleased tonight to be here with a few guests who are going to be able to take us through what is happening and how we all can respond. I will also talk a bit about the response in the courts that we are mounting at Democracy Forward alongside so many other groups. And then we will have some time for your questions throughout. So thank you for joining us. And without further ado, I'm going to go over the guests that we will have tonight, and then it will be my pleasure to turn it over to our first guest. So we are joined tonight by Representative Gerry Connolly, who is currently the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee in the United States Congress. We are joined tonight by Fatima Goss, the one and only, the CEO of the National Women's Law Center. We are also joined by Richard Trent, who is the executive director of the Main Street Alliance, which is an organization of small businesses, and has already been participating in lawsuits to defend communities and businesses against this administration's extreme agenda. And last but not least, we are joined by Rob Shriver, who up until 12:01 on Inauguration Day was the acting director at the Office of Personnel Management, the office that supports our civil service in the United States. And now we are pleased that he is the managing director of Civil Service Strong and a senior advisor at Democracy Forward. So I'm so pleased to have Representative Connolly, Fatima, Richard, and Rob with us. And we also have some Democracy Forward colleagues who will be tuning in on the live stream, seeing your comments and enabling us to answer some questions in real time. I will just say, as we reflect on this last month, this is an administration that came in and said they wanted to govern by quote unquote shock and awe, and we have seen them do that. That is not a way to prioritize the American people's interest, but a way to try to sow chaos and confusion and hopelessness and harm. But the good news is that Americans are pushing back. We see this every day in the courts and in our work at Democracy Forward, where we have seen more than 60 lawsuits filed just in this month alone, and a number of federal judges throughout the country standing up and blocking this administration's agenda. And we see it in communities and with people across the country too. So you're going to hear some about that today. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to visit the Democracy Forward website, but also the Democracy 2025, democracy2025.org website, where you can keep up with what is happening out of the White House and how people in communities are responding and access many resources. So we encourage you to go there after this town hall tonight to stay part of our work and to get engaged. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Representative Connolly, who has just been such a champion for people and communities and has really been responding in real time with his colleagues in Congress to the actions of the last month. So Representative Connolly, I would love to let you have a few minutes to talk with folks that are tuning in about what you're seeing. And then I'll begin by just wanting you to maybe share with people the breaking news that many of us are seeing and celebrating that you and your committee colleagues on your committee have launched a probe into the DOGE, the Elon Musk-driven Department of Government Efficiency, so-called. So I would love to hear about that and to have you talk with folks that are tuning in tonight.
Thank you, Skye. And good evening, everybody. It's evening here in Washington. I think this town hall meeting is really important. What we are witnessing is unprecedented, and that word gets bandied around, but this one really is unprecedented. It is a frontal, complete assault on the federal government as a government. It touches everything from food and health and safety to maternal child care to the functionality of the government itself to national security. And all of it under assault. And all of it led by an unelected billionaire, the richest man in the world, a South African migrant, Elon Musk. And the ironies of someone with so many conflicts, who himself is an immigrant, running an anti-immigrant, anti-government operation, a government with which he has billions of dollars of contracts, by the way, both in his electric vehicle operation and in his space operation. It is just unprecedented that he would have that kind of power. We have seen them go into the bowels of federal agencies in a way they did not 4 years ago, or the first time he was president, 8 years ago now. And they are dismantling, they are deconstructing, they are canceling, they are firing, they are ending probationary employment, they are downgrading and demoting and transferring where they can. And of course, they're also offering federal funding freeze, a federal hiring freeze, and an early retirement promise that really they can't make because it's predicated on another budget that hasn't been passed yet. So in the midst of this sort of fire hose, and it's been described as flooding the zone, they're doing so much that it's hard for poor little Democrats to keep up. And as Skye said, our strategy is to flood the zone in reverse. So we don't let anything go that's in jurisdiction in our committee. We've done in-depth letters to the president, to Elon Musk, to heads of agencies on everything that affects our jurisdiction, from the firing of inspectors general to the funding freeze, to the dismantlement of AID, to attacks at DOJ and the FBI. We haven't let anything go. And we think that's really important for a number of reasons. One is to lay down the alternative case, both legally and policy-wise. But it's also to put down flags that when we take back the majority in 2 years, this is the blueprint. This is the blueprint we're going to follow. And we're going to come back roaring, and we're going to attempt to undo what we can't undo in this time period. And we should keep in mind that the litigation is a real important part of this strategy. Our strategy is based on 3 elements: mobilization of civic groups, advocacy groups, labor unions, employee associations, advocacy groups like Democracy Forward, to start to build a huge corpus of resistance and opposition so that we get out of the doldrums and get into organizing, not agonizing, organizing. Secondly, we have to have a strategic message. We've got to be very disciplined in what we attack, what policies we decide to go after, what actions we decide to challenge, so that we're looking for our strong points and we're looking for the best arguments we can make that touch people's lives. We can't be seen as defending inside Beltway bureaucracy. We've got to be seen as champions for people's benefits. That so-called civil servant bureaucrat is looking out for your interest. And when he or she is replaced with a political partisan hack, they don't have your interests at heart. They have Donald Trump's interests, and they have a partisan agenda. And that can affect your benefits. That can affect whether you're served at all. And so those are the dots we need to connect. And finally, this litigation. We're working with state attorneys general, with groups like Democracy Forward, with labor unions and others to make sure they have standing, to try to assist them in litigating in front of judges, to try to reverse or at least stop and enjoin what we think are unlawful actions, or actions that go way beyond the power of the executive branch, and that there is a role clearly for the legislative branch, both in the power of the purse and in protecting agencies that we created by statute, by law. And they can't be deconstructed, in my opinion, simply by an action of executive order. And so that three-pronged strategy is going to guide us in everything we do. We're also looking at other tools we have available. For example, we have done we've done advertising on Facebook to drive whistleblowers or would-be whistleblowers to the portal we put up on our website for our committee. And that allows whistleblowers to come, be protected using Signal, so their anonymity or their identity is protected, but they can tell us what we need to know about something that is either unlawful or they suspect is, way beyond the bounds. And we're going to try to, make sure we act on that. I've set up a team, staff team on the committee to filter those whistleblower reports and complaints and to act on them. We're also setting up a rapid response team that about, Skye, that's coordinating with Democracy Forward and other advocacy groups to try to make sure we're on it. We're not letting anything go, and we're doing things, as you said, in real time. So it's going to be a busy period. We just got a new issue that's clearly within the jurisdiction of our committee, and that is the president has decided to essentially run the Postal Service from the White House by firing the Postal Board of Governors, which is a presidential appointed board. Right now it has a Democratic majority. They are confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So this is a really big and portentous move by Trump. 640,000 postal employees, almost all of whom are unionized. The Postal Service is mandated by the Constitution of the United States. It's the only service mandated in the Constitution. It goes to every home and every business every day. So this is one we've really got to get in the middle of, and we've got to watch like hawks. And it's only one, of course, among many challenges we face. So with that, Skye, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, one question that we got earlier and then it's now coming through with some comments on the live stream is just, I think everybody wants to know, what can Congress do to sort of check this executive, and what does that mean? I mean, right now there's a balance in Congress, not a really big balance, but a balance in Congress that's within the president's own party. And so, how do you see Congress's role, and then what is the strategy to try to get colleagues, I think, on the other side of the aisle to jump in and also seek to protect people and democracy?
Well, that question I get asked all the time. And I have to lower expectations a little bit. We're in the minority. The country gave the Republicans a trifecta. God knoweth why, but they did. So they've got control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. That doesn't mean we don't have tools at our disposal. We have a bully pulpit, which can be very powerful. We saw the across the board spending freeze quickly rescinded because we were able to mobilize public opinion very rapidly, and they responded quickly in the White House because they saw trouble coming. In Trump's first term, and we were in the minority, we had some real victories. Rob Shriver is on this telephone town hall tonight. He will remember that there was a proposal to abolish his agency, the Office of Personnel Management. I personally led the fight against that, and we beat them. It did not happen, even though they were still in charge, both of the White House and the House of Representatives. We were able to kind of fight them to a standstill on Schedule F. And once Biden came in the White House, the first thing he did was issue an executive order rescinding Schedule F. We fought them on ascertainment at GSA. Emily Murphy was the head of GSA. she had the power to ascertain who won the 2020 election. If she did not ascertain, there was no transition. We were able to bully her with the bully pulpit, if I can use that word, into doing the right thing, ascertaining the election, which allowed the transition and the swearing in of Joe Biden to go forward. So it's not that we can't have victories, but our tools are limited while we're in the minority. And we're going to do everything we can. We're going to use hearings. We're going to use the halls of Congress. We're going to use the media. We're going to use the bully pulpit. We're going to use the rule of seven. We're going to use litigation. We're going to use partnerships with outside advocacy groups and labor unions to do everything we can to help the American people understand what's at stake here and to try our best to stop them in their tracks as they are in this wrecking ball mission, which is not a government efficiency mission. It's just a mindless, reckless wrecking ball to destroy government and to destroy confidence in government. And that's going to hurt real Americans in real time.
Rep. Connolly, the other question that we have, and we have civil servants on the live stream tonight, and I know that you of course represent a district with many civil servants, is just a lot of folks are really concerned about the attacks that you've already spoken about tonight on the civil service from this administration. And so maybe if you could, the question is sort of what can Americans do? I mean, we're going to fight, we're fighting in the courts on all fronts, in the courts and in the administrative process, and you all have been quite supportive of that. And I know raising the alarm bell in Congress around these things. Are there other things that you want to see people do in terms of making their voices heard in support of our civil service?
The more we can sort of mobilize grassroots outside of the Beltway in communities that might surprise Republicans, where there's a big federal footprint. There's a big federal footprint in a state like New Mexico, huge federal footprint in a state like Alaska. These are Alaska, a Republican state, New Mexico, a Democratic state, but it surprises people to think about it. There are national labs like Los Alamos that do enormous service to the United States security posture. And we need to highlight that. We need to make sure people understand these are the people who are going to be affected. National Park Service, communities all across the country have Social Security offices, IRS offices, Veterans Administration hospitals and clinics and offices to process claims. All of that is under jeopardy when you have this kind of wrecking ball approach to the deconstruction of government by Elon Musk, who won a mandate from nobody. And I think the more we help educate voters and work with advocacy groups and civil society in small and medium-sized communities as well as larger cities, we start to build momentum in understanding that this is a mindless narrative that is destructive and is going to hurt the average American family.
Well, Representative Connolly, we are so grateful that you're here tonight and that you joined us. We know you've been on extensive travel, and so thank you for taking the time in the evening so that our folks from the West Coast can also join at the end of their day. And we appreciate you being with us and for all that you're doing.
Well, Skye, thank you. And thank you to Democracy Forward. You're doing the Lord's work. And we want to help you and collaborate with you in any way possible. Thank you for having me on tonight. And thanks so much for everybody for getting on for this town hall meeting.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Fatima Goss Graves, who will be coming on video soon and is the CEO of the National Women's Law Center. It is wonderful to have Fatima with us, and Fatima and I are going to do a bit of a conversational discussion, and I'll just reflect as we're moving to this, that in the last Trump administration, the National Women's Law Center, as it always is, was really on the front lines of protecting women and girls from a range of destructive policies. And then, of course, they're always doing that in the states. And then now we're back again. Democracy Forward has been so pleased to be able to work with the Law Center in so many ways, including in securing some key victories against the administration's attempt to undermine women in the workplace, as well as a range of other protections in the last administration. So Fatima, thank you for joining us tonight. And I really just wanted to start off by saying a huge thank you. You've got a lot of fans on the live stream, fans of the National Women Law Center. And we'd love to hear how as you're looking over this month and you're like looking ahead, really what you're seeing in terms of the effects on women and girls and the effects on communities across the country.
Well, I'm so glad to be with you guys tonight and so glad you had this conversation, Skye. And I have to say Democracy Forward is probably our favorite co-counsel and hoping that
we love you guys.
and hoping we will have a chance to team up in this time. I probably should start where the congressman was, because he sort of walked through the categories of destruction that we have seen over the last month, right? Whether it is freezing federal dollars or firing illegally civil servants or illegally engaging in a range of executive orders in the name of defending women or in the name of protecting this country from DEI. And they have basically engaged in a bunch of lawless behavior, pointing to defending and protecting women and pointing to ending diversity, equity, and inclusion as their justification for their lawlessness. And it's one thing to look at the executive orders in the abstract, but the moment they did the funding freeze, we started hearing immediately from folks who run rape crisis hotlines who are saying, we will have to shut down the line for the entire state, from folks who run domestic violence shelters, from Head Start programs, who even after the court enjoined the freeze and the spigot should have turned back on and programs should have been operational. That was not true for many, many days for a lot of programs. These are not programs. These are not, childcare programs are very small businesses. They do not operate with giant budgets. If they don't have money to pay their staff, they have to shut down. And when they shut down, that's not only terrible for the mostly women workforce who work for them, but really for every parent who relies on childcare and early learning, and for the companies that are wondering why their workforce can't show up to work because they don't have childcare. So all of that was sort of just in the first 2 weeks. So there is a specific gender story for basically almost all of their executive actions, whether or not we always see it through that lens. The other thing, and I'm really curious because, Skye has had a lot of hats over time, but one of those hats has been working deeply in the reproductive freedom movement, right? One of the things that they have been trying to do far more quietly is begin their assault on reproductive freedom, right? The executive order that sort of lays the path to undo many of the guidance that have been critical ensuring people can access care in the wake of Dobbs, or the little quiet ways they are trying to grant fetuses more rights than pregnant people in this country, hoping that we won't notice. And you saw just this week for show, as fast as they have been running around the government wrecking shop, they basically issued an executive order on IVF that amounted to a plan to study a plan about whether or not people cared about IVF. Well, I thought they could, what's the saying, move fast and break things? Why can't they move fast and break things to get people IVF?
I know. Well, these are all great points. And I'll say on the reproductive freedom issues, I'm so glad you brought those up, because some of the things, it's very clear that they're going to accelerate seeking to deprive, women, veterans, and people in armed forces of reproductive health care. And a lot of these, incredibly important access points that the federal government has been responsible for, where we've made progress, but they're not being that loud about it.
These are
You know?
in the dark of night, quiet chirps. You have to go deep in to figure out what they did. I don't see big press conferences about
Right.
many ways they're denying care.
Right. Well, we'll have to work on that, and we know that they will show us. They show people who they are every day, and they will do that, and we'll be there to help people and communities respond as these things sort of take effect. Maybe with some legal challenges with you all, and other ways of mobilizing. Let's talk about this obsession that they seem to have with eradicating what they are going to call DEIA, but really these incredibly extreme orders and now letters that are seeking to condition federal funding on a particular ideological view, seeking to threaten people that if, I mean, we were in court earlier this week and the government could not answer the question. If the judge said, if are you saying that there would be a penalty for someone that was teaching about Jim Crow in school, like part of our history, and they wouldn't answer the question on the record. This is happening in 2025 in this first month. But let's talk about those executive orders and what you're seeing, what you think you will see in the sort of spaces and communities that the National Women's Law Center shows up for.
Yeah, I see these executive orders it's doing two things. One is to continue to whip up a frenzy to make DEI the boogeyman and to blame it for everything. So if the economy crashes, it's going to be the fault of
A
DEI.
plane crash.
When the horrific plane crash, you saw them saying it was the fault of DEI. Firefighters that have traumatized Southern California, DEI is always their answer. And so it is used both to distract, and also the end goal is to go after our basic and longstanding civil rights protections. The idea that you should be able to work and learn and have housing with safety and dignity and equity, and that those spaces are not spaces of discrimination. There's a 60-year-old agreement about that, right? So that is what they're really going after, both in these executive orders that on their face are illegal, even though they say we're getting rid of illegal DEI. They put illegal in the subject line as if that changes the fact that we have 60-year-old requirements, right? But what they're really seeking, and this is the second thing, they know what they're doing is lawless. They're hoping that companies, that academic institutions, that small organizations, that all civil society complies in advance, that they are so deeply afraid that they will bring the force of the federal government inappropriately and lawlessly towards them, that you will keep spinning and doing whatever you can to sort of stay away from that light. That has to be confronted head on, right? What they are doing is not only in tension with the Civil Rights Act, with longstanding laws like whether it be Title IX or beyond. It is inviting extra discrimination. It is creating containers where organizations are not going to take the steps they actually need to take to ensure that people can learn and work with dignity.
Well, thank you, Rob, for joining us. And for everybody, I know Rob said it a few times, but you can learn more about these efforts at civilservicestrong.org, on the civil service particularly. And then remember that you can go to democracy2025.org for broader efforts inclusive of the civil service, but so many other efforts to protect our people and democracy in this time. So thank you so much. We had two questions that came in during the live stream that I'm going to go ahead and read, and then we'll turn to our final guest. One question, which is appropriate for us at Democracy Forward, since we're in court all the time, is what happens if Trump or Musk ignore court orders, as they've already been doing, this questioner says. And then one question asks, what if the Supreme Court blesses a range of unconstitutional actions? So let me spend some time addressing those, and then we'll turn to our final wonderful guest for the evening, who has really also been on the front lines with us in court in this time. So the question around court orders, first of all, this is a fight that if Elon Musk or if the president decides to pick this fight, it's not a great fight for them to pick, because the federal courts, whether judges have been appointed by Democratic administrations, Republican administrations, or the president Trump himself, do not like it when people ignore their orders and ignore their power. And so there are a range of tools that the courts have. The courts are already being vocal. If there are questions about compliance, there are a range of broader tools like contempt that the courts can use, if there's truly non-compliance, and intentional disregarding of the court process. And then, of course, Congress has a range of checks. And so if we get to a situation where this administration will simply ignore court orders, and will flout the courts, it will be important that both the courts and Congress check the administration. And that is going to be something that we are monitoring in our cases. We are using the courts right now. The courts are being highly active in monitoring compliance with their orders, which is a good thing. And that is that I know it's on a lot of people's minds, and that is a piece of the work that we're doing. In addition to this, when JD Vance came out and said that he was, um, started criticizing and saying that he might not, that maybe they didn't have to follow court orders. We did see people immediately come out and oppose that, including members of the president and vice president's own party. And so it really will take everyone enforcing the rule of law. But there is reason to think that if they do flout the rule of law, that there will be those checks there. So that's one question. And then the other is just around the Supreme Court. And I think that there is no way around the fact that this is a Supreme Court that has rewritten American law, reinterpreted and reversed certain constitutional protections. But we have also seen this court reject a number of fringe legal theories, including the so-called independent theory of the state legislature, which the president and his allies have sought to peddle before the courts. And so we are going to really litigate as hard as we can in the lower courts, bring the best cases up to the Supreme Court, and we do believe that the courts will fundamentally be a check on much of this activity, and that the people have power too, and that Congress needs to step in cases where the courts are not able to protect the rights of people. So finally, I have our wonderful guest, the executive director for Main Street Alliance, Richard Trent. I have to tell you, I'm going to ask Richard to talk to all of you about what Main Street Alliance is and what they do, because it is so inspiring. But Main Street Alliance has also been a core partner of Democracy Forward. I will tell you, in the early days of this administration, it seems like it's been more than a month ago, but it's only been a month, when there was a threat that essential services across the country were going to be halted, that funding was going to be frozen, everything from childcare centers to Meals on Wheels. Richard Trent and his team at Main Street Alliance joined with us and others, and we went into court and were able to stop that essential services and funding freeze. They have been by our side in so many important efforts to defend people and communities, and really also to give voice to the role that businesses and small businesses can play in this moment. So Richard, thank you so much for joining our webinar. Thank you for being able to make it to where people from all time zones could tune in. I know it's late in the evening on the East Coast, but we wanted our West Coast friends to be able to tune in. And I'd love for you to just share with those tuning in a little bit about Main Street Alliance, and what you all are doing and how you're seeing this last month.
Absolutely. Happy to join. And my two kids are happy too, because they got to watch TV on a school night, which is
There you
pretty,
go.
we don't do a lot of TV, but Daddy has a conference call. So Main Street Alliance, we've been around since 2008. It's an organization that started with small business owners in Maine, Oregon, Vermont, back in the Obamacare fight days, back when we thought it was going to be single payer. These were folks who knew then that affordable health care was something that would help drive their own business sustainability. They approached it almost from a place of pragmatism, not even dogma necessarily. And they managed to rally thousands of small business owners at that time to first push for single payer, but then to to fight for the Affordable Care Act at a time when it was still, working to gain traction. Since then, the organization has grown to a national network of 30,000 plus small business owners. And our theory of change is very simple. If you bring small business owners together uh, to build community, to activate main streets across the country as resource hubs, as best practice sharing hubs, then it starts with that exercise of power building, but then it gets channeled into real targeted efforts that actually shape policies that uplift our local economies. So we believe at Main Street that the folks that should be shaping the conversations and driving the conversations that impact our local economies are entrepreneurs and small business owners. And we're really grateful for the partnership that we have with Democracy Forward, and we're super grateful to be a part of these legal challenges because I mean I'll speak on a couple different levels about why I think it's important that small business owners are on the front lines of this fight. I mean, the first idea is just that small business owners are key players in legal challenges against harmful policies, right? So small business owners aren't just passive participants in the economy. We have standing in legal fights. And in past administrations, small business coalitions have successfully challenged policies that harm Main Street, whether it's been healthcare rollbacks or unfair tax laws. And the same is the case today. If Trump guts essential programs or enacts anti-competitive policies, small businesses will be among the first to take him to court. And with partners like Democracy Forward, we actually have that opportunity. Uh, the second big reason why it matters to be for small business owners to be on the front lines is because um, defunding government equals defunding small business support, right? So cuts to government programs like the SBA and community banking initiatives. We saw a lot of this play out even with the funding, with the federal funding freeze a few weeks ago. Those things disproportionately hurt entrepreneurs, while a lot of large corporations, frankly, continue to benefit from loopholes and subsidies. So public education, healthcare, transportation, they're essential for a strong workforce and customer base for a lot of our members. And if those services are gutted, then small businesses bear the burden. So either through less stable workforce or declining local demand, whatever you want to put your finger on. The third thing I'll talk about is just how defund efforts to defund the government directly impact things like disaster relief, accessing disaster relief and economic recovery. So I know just from being on the phone, being on emails with our members that small business owners they're still recovering from the pandemic. And Trump's playbook of defunding government, it really threatens access to relief programs that help entrepreneurs survive economic downturns and some of the calamities that we've seen in the last few years. Something sort of related that we haven't necessarily seen play out yet, but is inevitably at the heart of a lot of these defunding efforts is just the fact that you know resisting monopolization requires a very strong, properly funded government. So without government enforcement of antitrust laws, large corporations just continue to crush small businesses, frankly. And we need a government that protects fair competition. We need a government that just doesn't let corporate giants rig the game, frankly. Um, Small business owners also are, and this is maybe the most important point, small business owners are unbelievably influential messengers in court and in public opinion, arguably some of the most credible messengers around. So when corporations challenge public interest regulations, they hide behind big lobbying groups. But when small business owners challenge some of those harmful policies, they bring credibility, real world impact, and community backing that courts and the public take very, very seriously. So we believe that that Main Street is the heart of democracy, and we also know that we're not powerless in this fight. Uh, we're 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 mobilizing, be it as naive or noble, whatever you want to call it as it may be. We're mobilizing for a pro small business government. And we're not waiting for the fallout. And luckily, we have partners like Democracy Forward to be action partners in this work. So, through collective action, legal advocacy, coalition building, I believe our 30,000 plus members believe that we can intentionally invest in Main Street and stop with this windfall for corporate special interests. So yeah, Trump's the push to defund government is not just like it's not just a political fight, for our small business members. It's for them it is literally existential, and the testimonies that we were able to collect ahead of the legal challenge with the funding freeze prove this perfectly. I mean, we had childcare operators who were worried that frozen state block grants would mean they couldn't make payroll. We had, scientists and researchers that were funded by government grants, and the portals were totally closed down and they couldn't access their funding. They didn't know if they were going to be able to continue doing work. This was real. This wasn't like and I think that's the importance of a lot of the small business testimony. It makes a lot of the sort of heady, high level legal stuff very, very real with on the ground implications and ramifications. So, yeah, we're not powerless. We're going to keep fighting back in the courts and in Congress. And if you're a small business owner, we encourage you to become a member and to become a part of our growing national community. If you just believe in the power of local economies, then we encourage you to make a donation. We go to mainstreetalliance.org/donate. We're not shameless plug, but and if you're a part of the institutional funder community, if working with foundations who are key for powering a lot of this work, we should have a conversation around what meaningful collaboration looks like. But this is an all hands on deck effort, and we're super happy to be a part of this.
And you've been there, and so that's mainstreetalliance.org, right? Where people can go and find out how to join and support and donate, and really bring this power. We see the power of the stories and the voices that Main Street Alliance brings into so much of this work. I wanted to ask you as we're closing this out, for many people, the courts are, right now the courts really are one of the key levers to push back, to ensure that our rights are being protected, to ensure that our futures are being protected. And that's not always a comfortable thing for everyone. A lot of people won't think twice about maybe writing a letter to the editor or calling their congressperson, but you start thinking about using the courts and it seems, to be a bit of a different step. And so could you tell me sort of how your members, we talk to a lot of organizations, like how your members have felt about Main Street Alliance's leadership in some of these really core and early court battles?
So the thing that becomes abundantly clear when you talk to small business owners is that way too many of them are just operating in silos. Frankly, a lot of folks start small businesses because they're kind of lone wolves who like to just be their own boss. But that also comes with, its trade-offs. And so a lot of folks are just operating in isolation. And so the truth is that these legal challenges have been a signal to them that they aren't alone in their struggles. That the 50% of small business owners who are operating with basically like a month of operating income in the bank, they are not alone. That there's support on the horizon. That there are people that care about them. That there are people that think about them, and that are fighting for them every step of the way. So a lot of the how they've been processing and metabolizing our involvement with these legal challenges has, I think, been a clear signal to them that we care and that we're fighting for them. But I think that it's also it's also empowering for a lot of our small business owners because they're often so focused on the day-to-day grind of just running a business, that us filling them in on these legal challenges and empowering them to be articulate communicators for why these things matter, it goes a long way for their own status as credible messengers in their community. So now we've got hundreds of small business members that can speak very, very clearly about why the federal funding freeze impacts entrepreneurs and nonprofits disproportionately. We've got folks who can talk about why the IRS mining data is a big problem for not just for taxpayers but for small business owners. So it's been educational and informative and empowering, I think, for our small business owners, but also crucial for building the power that we need to keep this fight going.
Well, thank you. And Richard, thank you so much for everything. The fact that you're able to bring that voice of business in gives everyone perspective, the credibility, and just the courage and the community that we all need to have in this time. I wanted to thank everyone that has been tuning in and to encourage you to learn about the organizations that have been here tonight. You can learn more about us at democracyforward.org. Please learn about our initiatives, our Democracy 2025 initiatives, our Civil Service Strong at civilservicestrong.org initiatives, and then, of course, Main Street Alliance and the National Women's Law Center are wonderful organizations to follow and to support. So thank you all for tuning in. It has been quite a month. There are many responses that we've been able to mount, and we've already seen some very important wins, including keeping essential services and funding available to people through litigation that Democracy Forward brought alongside partners like Main Street Alliance. And we are going to continue to keep working day and night, morning, noon, and night, and into the wee hours of the morning sometimes, to make sure that people and communities are defended in this time, to make sure that the courts remain a front line of defense. And we want to have you with us. So please follow us at democracyforward.org. Come sign up for our newsletters and join us for our next town hall. Thank you so much.